Welcome. Welcome. If you can hear me, can you give me a little wave? Woohoo! Great. It's so nice to see so many of you here and some people that I've seen in past events. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. For those of you that don't know, my name is Melanie Brooks. I am the audience coordinator at the BDN, and I produce these events for you all, and it's my pleasure to do so. Thank you for joining BDN Events Online tonight. Our meetup features Kristen Maley from Good Shepherd Food Bank and Shira Patterson from the United Way of Eastern Maine. So thank you both for joining us tonight. I really appreciate you taking your time out of your day to share what you guys have been going through with COVID-19. A lot of our past event participants have been asking to hear about nonprofits. So we're really excited to have you. For those of you who are in attendance who are BDN subscribers, thank you so much. Your support means the world to our editors, our reporters, and our staff. And it's a big reason why we can have programming like this that's free and open to the public. So thank you so very much for supporting us. So we have two wonderful special guests with us tonight. I'm just going to take a minute to tell you a little bit about both of them. Kristen is the president of Good Shepherd Food Bank. You can see her on the screen. She has a little GSFB after her name. She just gave a little wave. She and her team of 85 work with a network of more than 500 nonprofit organizations to distribute 25 million meals a year, making Good Shepherd Food Bank Maine's largest hunger relief organization. This year, Kristen was named as one of Maine Biz's 2020 Business Leaders of the Year, and currently she serves on the board of the Maine Philanthropy Center, the board of Crown of Maine Organic Cooperative, the steering committee of the Maine Food Strategy, and is a member of the Boston Federal Reserve Bank's Community Development Advisory Council. Shira is the president and CEO at United Way of Eastern Maine, and she has a little UWEM after her name. You can see her on the screen. She has an extensive background of corporate, nonprofit, and community involvement up in the Bangor region mostly. On top of her work with the United Way of Eastern Maine, both as a volunteer, a board member, and a staff member, she has a long history of bringing people and communities together. She currently serves on the Maine Association of Nonprofits Board of Directors and Acadia Hospital's Board of Trustees. She has also served on the board of directors for the Bangor Humane Society, University of Maine Alumni Association, United Way of Eastern Maine, and the Greater Bangor Convention and Visitors Bureau. So you can see that our special guests have a lot of interests, and they give a lot of their time to the community. And so I just want to thank both of you for giving your time to the BDN and our readers tonight, and really appreciate you doing that. So I am really happy to give both Shira and Kristen time to tell us about how COVID-19 and this pandemic has affected their ability to do the work that they do for Mainers in need. Kristen, why don't you start it off, and then we can join, Shira can join in afterwards.
That sounds great. Thanks, Melanie, for the opportunity to talk with your readers, and I'm really honored to be here with Shira, one of our many partners who are serving multiple needs for the state of Maine. I also want to thank our partners. You mentioned we have over 500 partners that we could not do this work without. I see many of them are here on the call. So I'm thrilled. I can't see everybody's names because there's so many here, but I see Suhan from Hamden and Charlene Buzza from, I know it's Aroostook County, but Charlene, you're telling me it's Presque Isle, I think, and Wendy Harrington from Seacoast Mission. So again, you're gonna hear a lot about the work that our partners are doing, but I've always been proud of our work, but I think never more so than I am right now, just seeing the resiliency of this amazing group of organizations that we work with. The Good Shepherd Food Bank's been doing this work for over 40 years, but I've been at the food bank for 10 years. I don't think anyone's ever seen a time quite like this. Before COVID hit, we were serving approximately 180,000 Mainers in need through our network of partners, and that includes 1 in 5 Maine kids that were relying on the food pantry network to get the food that they need. On a normal day, we provide about 68,000 meals. And so when COVID hit, we knew that the people that we serve were likely going to be hit first, hit hardest, and probably have the longest tail of this. As we know, typically when things are difficult for the community, they tend to hit those who are most in need first and hardest. So we were really definitely knew that we needed to respond right away. So we know right now our estimates are we think food insecurity could rise by as much as 40% over the next few months, and so that's what we're preparing for. And so we are channeling all of the resources that we can to continue to be a support for the state and for our partners so that we can keep making sure people get the food they need. Definitely the surge in demand that we've seen, the decline in food donations and the decline in our own workforce, and just the overall disruption to our own operations really kind of created the perfect storm for us. But we were able to make a lot of changes really quickly. And I'm really proud of our team for the response we've been able to put out. The first thing we did in mid-April was we put together an internal COVID-19 response team. And we've been meeting, we were meeting daily. We just started to scale back those daily meetings to just twice a week, just to make sure we were all kept abreast of what the latest updates were coming from the CDC, from the governor's office, as well as working with a lot of other state and county agencies in emergency response, as well as staying connected to Feeding America, who's kind of our umbrella organization for all the food banks around the country, and really relying on all those organizations to share information and to understand kind of who was doing what. So the first thing that we needed to address was the safety of our own staff and the safety of our network of partners, and certainly the people that they serve. We know that people living with food insecurity, we serve a lot of seniors and a lot of people with underlying health conditions. So keeping them safe while still getting them food was really top priority. At the food bank, we immediately sent home all staff who were able to do their jobs from home, as well as allowed any staff member who was in a high risk classification or had a family member to allow them to work from home, or even if they couldn't work from home, to not require them to come to work. So we limited how many people are coming into the warehouse. We put in extensive cleaning protocols, more than we ever have before. And you know, a lot of signage went up, and then we started putting in the maximum occupancy in different rooms. And so our whole working environment looks very different. We had to move to a split shift for our warehouse team because we just had so many of them working on the floor. It was impossible for them to keep a 6-foot distance from each other. So we're now operating from 4 a.m. to 7 p.m. in 2 shifts. And certainly that is difficult on our supply chain team members. Some are having to get up at 2:30 in the morning. Others aren't coming home until 8:30 and 9 o'clock at night. So certainly some challenges for them and their own, you know, family. So we also then started sharing with our partners all these changes that we made and encourage them to make similar changes to be able to keep themselves safe and the people they serve safe. And I'll have to admit, when we first kind of started planning, we were really bracing ourselves for planning of what's going to happen if a significant number of our partners just have to close, because we know so many of them rely on older volunteers who are not going to be able to volunteer anymore. We know that they are operating on very low resources, and so we were really worried about that. We worried for no reason. 93% of our partners are still operating, never stopped. Many of them are even open more and serving more people than they ever have before. So they have just been amazing. They very quickly shifted to a no or low touch model. Before this hit, most of our partners, how they served people is they opened up what looked almost like a grocery store model, where people would come and oftentimes congregate, knowing when a distribution time was going to start. And then they would get let in and they could shop for food, much like we all are able to do in a grocery store. Obviously, that model had to go out the door very quickly. And so most of our partners switched to a drive-through model where they pre-packed food, and then people would drive up, they'd open up the trunk, they'd throw in the food, and off they go. Other partners moved to an appointment only, where people would call, share, what they needed, how many people in their household. The food pantry volunteers would, again, assemble a box or bags of food for them, say, okay, I'll be here at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, they put it outside, person comes, picks it up, and off they go. Many of our partners are also doing home deliveries now, and we've had great partnerships with a lot of the organizations that were doing helping people, driving people to medical appointments. And obviously they're not doing that right now. So a lot of those volunteers have shifted to helping our partners do home deliveries of food for people who who do not feel safe going out. So huge pivoting happening in that network of 500 partners that have just, again, have made it possible for us it's allowed us to just focus on the food. We just make sure we get the food. You guys definitely take it from here, and you absolutely have in spades. So again, cannot thank you enough. But because of those initial changes, our partners were initially a little concerned about handling perishable food. What many people sometimes don't realize is food banks have really moved away from kind of the dented cans that people think of when they think of food banks. Prior to COVID, over 60% of the food we handled was fresh food. But obviously when you're doing drop-offs, when you're just kind of putting food in the trunk of somebody's car, our partners were a little nervous on doing fresh food that way. And so we saw a huge surge in demand for shelf-stable food, which normally is not the kind of food that we have a lot of. So we had to very quickly start buying food. And we also wanted to be able to pre-pack that food into boxes to minimize the handling and the timing that our partners would need to handle that food, again, to minimize the amount of work they'd have to do working alongside other volunteers. So these boxes really helped kind of relieve the pressure and the burden on our food pantries. And fortunately, LL Bean has stepped up and they helped to relieve our burden by packing all of the boxes for us. So we were buying food, they would come and pick it up, box it in Freeport and bring it back to us. And it ended up being a great help for them. They were seeing obviously a significant decline in sales due to the pandemic, and their fulfillment center, they wanted to keep people working. So this was a great way to keep their staff working while providing a really vital help for us. So we obviously needed to get a lot more shelf-stable food. Normally, food donations account for about 70% of the food we distribute. I will say actually it's food donations from retailers account for 70%. In total, about 90% of the food we distribute is donated food. That number really went down significantly. As you all know, there's not a lot of excess food happening in the retail channel right now. And so that was really difficult. So we purchased over almost $4 million worth of food over the past, say, 2 months. Our normal purchasing budget for a year is usually about $1.5 million. So that's a big change. About 45% of the food we distributed in April was purchased. Normally it's only about 10%. So that's been a big shift. We also, in order to help support our partners, we granted a lot of funding directly to our partners. We knew that there were needs that we could not provide for them. They needed cleaning supplies, they needed boxes and bags, they needed gas cards for people who were doing home deliveries. So we've granted out nearly $1 million worth of direct grants to a network of partners as well, to help support them. And also recognizing, the food bank is getting a lot of attention through this, and that's resulted in a huge surge in donations, which we're incredibly grateful for. But we know sometimes that may have come that our partners don't always have that same visibility. And so we wanted to make sure that that funding that we raised, that a portion of that went back to our partners. And so I'm really glad that we've been able to do this. After that initial surge in need, we've been hearing from a lot of our partners, the need is it's that spike, and then it's come down a little bit, but more than 80% of our partners are saying they're still seeing though an increase over what their normal need was before COVID hit. And so in addition to buying food, we've also taken on 10 temporary workers to help with, because again, we're down some of our workers based on either health concerns or needing to take care of kids at home and all of those challenges that many of you are facing. Overall, we estimate that our COVID-related costs from March through August will be a little over $6.3 million on top of our annual already regular operating budget. Fortunately, again, because of the amazing outpouring of support, we've raised more than $5 million towards that, which is, again, we're incredibly grateful. So this is going to be an ongoing need. I think right now what we're really doing is I think we felt like, okay, we handled the sprint, right? Those first kind of 8 weeks was a sprint, and we handled that. And now we're kind of saying, okay, now we need to get ready for the marathon. So we've just now announced to our partners, we're going to transition away from doing the pre-packed boxes of shelf-stable food. We've been hearing from many of them. They're now kind of comfortable in this new normal and are really eager and willing to start moving more perishable food again, which is great news because we're about to head into Maine's growing season, which is fabulous. So we're starting to refocus our efforts now on getting more of that produce and protein and dairy that we know our partners want. And we've said thank you very much to LL Bean, but now we're going to stop having them pack the boxes to go back to kind of our regular way of distributing food, which will definitely take a little bit of stress off of our team. And now we're starting to plan for the next 6 months. What happens, post July? We definitely have heard from our partners the expansion in unemployment and in SNAP benefits has been a lifesaver. I think if those policy changes did not go into place, I think we would have seen a jump of more than 100% in need. So we're all kind of holding our breath of what happens as those policies expire at different times in the summer and the fall, and we'll see what the economy is going to do. So that's really where we are now. We're kind of planning from anything from possibly seeing a 40% increase in food insecurity to even thinking through what would happen if we see 100% increase. That 40% increase would mean that we'd have about 250,000 Mainers living with hunger, which is just staggering. So we are going to continue to do everything we can to make sure we are here for the long run, both for the people we serve and for our partners, who that word partner has never meant more than it does now, for sure. I really can't thank them enough. They are the boots on the ground, really doing incredibly hard work in very challenging conditions. And so we're honored to be able to get them the food they need to continue to do this work, and we're hopefully going to be able to continue to do so. I'm going to stop there to give Shira her time, and then really look forward to answering your questions.
Well, thank you so much. It's really truly partnership, as you talked about, is so important. And I hear so much overlap of what Good Shepherd Food Bank is doing with your partners and what we're doing with ours. And it's different because United Way is not traditionally a direct service organization. We are a fundraising organization. And our mission is to improve lives by mobilizing the caring power of people and communities. And United Way of Eastern Maine serves 5 counties. We're in Penobscot, Piscataquis, Hancock, Washington, and Waldo counties. And that's about 40% of the landmass of the state of Maine and about 21% of the population. We're focused on 3 major areas: basic needs, substance use disorder, and early childhood development. And so as COVID-19 was developing and we were learning and hearing more about it, we also knew, okay, we need to get ready because it's not just business as usual. As important as the core issues we support are, we know that there's going to be even more need as this develops. And so what we really focused on pretty immediately was, okay, for one, we have to figure out how to transition our organization to be remote, because we need to continue to bring in the funds that the community depends on. We fund directly about 25 programs throughout those 5 counties, but we also raise money through more than 140 business campaigns that are supporting, I would say hundreds of organizations throughout not only Eastern Maine, but beyond, because people also give directly to organizations through our campaign. So our ability to continue to bring in those dollars and still get them out the door was very important. And so we were making sure we were all set up and that everybody could do what they needed to do from home to keep those dollars flowing. We also knew, okay, we have this new need that we need to respond to. So United Way really is built for this. We talk about it all the time in the office. We are part of a global network, and you'll hear that, Brian Gallagher, who's the president of United Way Worldwide, say that as well. We listen to the community needs, we hear them, and we respond to them. And the number one way we do that is by raising funds, but the other way is by coordinating and convening partners around these needs. So one of the things we wanted to pay attention to is not only anecdotally, what do we know are the needs, but what do we really see are the needs? And so we did, we analyzed some of the information that we had available to us. And so that is, a big part of that is 211. So 211, if you don't know, is a phone number you can call in Maine, and it's in a lot of places around the country, but you can get information about health and human service needs. So for you, if you needed information about resources, you could call 211 24/7. You're going to talk to a person who can help you walk through your situation. I know a lot of people use it for their parents or maybe their neighbors. You know, they're trying to help get people connected with resources. So it just so happens too that when 211 was set up by the United Ways in Maine, so there are 9 United Ways in the state of Maine, and we partner on a lot of efforts. 211 is no different. So about 15 years ago, we established 211 Maine. And because it's such a great resource and it's also supported by the state said, hey, let's use 211 as our #1 number for people to get information about COVID-19. So of course the calls are going to increase. But we wanted to look at what types of things are people calling about, what are those needs? And so the requests over the last several months have more than doubled from about 10,000 last year through this time period to now we're at over close to 26,000 calls. And I'm just talking about Eastern Maine, so not statewide. And so the #1 area of increase was healthcare, and that increased by over 700%. But that's also due to that being the category. If you're just calling to get information about COVID-19, it's going to go under healthcare. So it makes a lot of sense that would increase. The other top categories have been government and legal, employment and income, food, and housing and shelter. And those categories have all seen a significant increase. Food, shelter, fuel assistance are typically the top calls we're seeing at 211. And so it's not a surprise that those categories are in the top, but the percentage of increase, and I can just show you some of this information here. I didn't want to do full on PowerPoint, but I think having some of the data is helpful. So you can see, you know, these are, you know, when I talk about the 211 call categories, these are the top categories here. And some other interesting information, we looked to the Maine Association of Nonprofits because early on they did a survey of nonprofits in the state of Maine to say, what are you dealing with now? What do you think you're going to be dealing with? And so we took a subset of that, which was just respondents in Eastern Maine, and 66% of those people had felt that COVID-19 has had a high impact on their programs, services, and operations. And this was right at the outset. And 100% of those people said they felt it would be high in the future going forward. And more than 50% of those identified the top things they were most concerned about or anticipated as budgetary implications, which we were hearing, cancellation of events we were also hearing. I mean, we canceled our own biggest fundraiser that brings in a significant percentage of our amount for our campaign, and disruption of services and staff and volunteer absences were big concerns that people had. And just digging a little bit further into the into the open-ended questions, the client outcomes and adverse impacts on the community well-being, specifically around social isolation, was something not only that MAMP survey found, but something that we were hearing from our partners at United Way. And the new rules, how are people adapting their services, which Kristen talked a lot about, to meet the new requirements of social distancing. And now we're hearing about that as people think about, okay, you know, we have been able to let a lot of our employees work remotely, and now it's time to start thinking about coming back. And how do we do that safely? And so we've been having internal conversations about that, but also as we learn of resources, making sure we're sharing that with our network of partners as well. And I'm going to stop sharing because I think I'll just talk a little bit too. So, you know, the other things we were hearing was around, you know, the nonprofits that we're dealing with. You know, the COVID response has a lot, it's aligned with our mission, it's aligned with our goals. but we've been able to help work with a lot of new organizations we didn't already work with through the emergency, the COVID relief fund that we set up for Eastern Maine. So that was one of the things we did very quickly to mobilize. We had that fund set up over the weekend when we became very clear on Friday the 13th that we were not likely to come back to work on Monday. And so we were able to get a fund started that was going to be specifically responding to the emergency needs that were arising from COVID. And Bangor Savings Bank partnered to underwrite that fund. So 100% is going back out to the community. It was very important to us that we were very quickly distributing funds back out because we knew people needed the money and they needed it now. We also worked with all the United Ways in Maine to do Maine United Telethon, which happened in mid-April, early to mid-April. And that brought in $630,000, a little bit more than that. And, you know, the people that were calling, and this happens with telethons in Maine all the time. People, they call, they participate. It was incredible, the people that we were talking to that were on the phones that had actually recently been laid off, even temporarily, and saying, you know what, I need the money. Other people need the money more than me, and so I'm going to give. And that night we had a snowstorm and the power went out and people were still calling. So, I mean, that's just one, and that was, you know, when you talk about partnership and how that's so important, we were facing this issue on a statewide level, on a, you know, on a global level, really. But that was just, it's really special to see things like that. Volunteerism is another key need that we have been able to help. We already do this. We help connect people who want to volunteer with volunteer opportunities. At the outset of this, I think we had a list of close to 100 people who had contacted United Way of Eastern Maine who wanted to volunteer. And the organizations were thrilled that people wanted to volunteer, but they weren't quite ready to place volunteers because it has to be done safely. And so as time has gone on, people have been able to find safe volunteer opportunities and make those connections. And that's been really great to help support. And we've worked with Tip Whip, which is a company in Orono that is a little bit like Uber for college students for rides. And so they've been able to partner with us to create this volunteer incentive program, which is a pretty fun way to recognize volunteers and keep people connected. Most of all, what we knew was that people wanted to help, they just needed to be connected. And so we've been hyper-focused on learning from our partners and in the community, what do people need, what do organizations need, and then how can we help make those connections. We've also—
Go ahead, Jen, sorry.
No, that's okay. We also have a free tax preparation program, which I'm proud to say we're the only one in the state that was able to continue operating because we already had a virtual model. And so we've been able to continue to deliver those free tax preparation services, helping people get the returns and the credits that they need through this virtual model. And now we're supporting some of the other sites throughout the state who are starting to open up again. And I just want to touch on the funding because I think people are interested in that. You know, well, okay, you've talked about this COVID fund, and you know we fundraise anyway. We raise just about $1.5 million every year in Eastern Maine that supports those programs I talked about. But when we mobilized to do this funding, it was really important to be able to distribute funds where they were most needed. And so we did set up this fund, and here's some of the quick results. The fund has raised just shy of $300,000 to date. We've done 112 grants to nonprofits and distributed just over $250,000 and $250,900. And that's helping close to 30,000 people. Our regular work helps close to 50,000 people. So you can see just in the short period from mid-March to now, you know, that need has grown and we've been able to support that and respond to that. And just a couple more specific, you know, what are people seeking funds for? And this is, when I say people, it's nonprofit organizations. We donate funds directly, we give funds directly to nonprofits who are working with people that are recipients of the direct service. So food has been big, and it continues to be big, but we've seen a bit of a shift. And basic goods are another thing that people really need. Supplies, PPE have been some of the things we've been able to support. And the other piece is changes to the direct service provision. So some organizations have needed to get additional technology to be able to serve their clients. One program needed blood pressure monitors for people because they're now not coming in to get checked, they're doing it from home. And so simple things like that have been able to make a big difference for organizations. And I think that's the bulk of what I wanted to share. I think the big thing is around, it's more than money. It's also convening, you know, we have peer groups of executive directors or volunteer coordinators or fundraising professionals at different nonprofits throughout Eastern Maine who United Way is bringing together to just either have some training occasionally or just talk about what they're worried about and how do we help support each other through this. When this first started happening, we were convening partners, whoever wanted to show up on a Zoom call twice a week. And some of the coolest connections I saw through that, I mean, we had an organization based in Ellsworth who was on the call. And he was talking and he said, oh, we have this mask, we have this PPE. And at that point, it was very hard to get. And an organization in Bangor that desperately needed the PPE. And the director from Ellsworth was like, I'll drive it to Bangor. I mean, it's those cool things that, you know, the money is very important, and it's these other things that I think really, it helps energize people and just feel supported and like we're working together and connected.
I think probably one of the hardest parts about this pandemic is feeling out of control. So bringing people together the way that you two do, I think, can help a lot of stress. And have either of you been as busy as you have been the past couple months?
No. It's the constancy of it and the blending of the boundaries between work and home are just so blurred. And it's so constant that it definitely feels like you're kind of on 7 days a week now. And and that's why we're kind of talking about how do we make sure we're really all here for the marathon that we know is coming.
Yeah.
I remember in the beginning feeling like I need a day off so bad and I just can't take one.
Yeah.
And that wasn't really a healthy place to be. And luckily we have a great team and we could have conversations about that and just really, and I had to check myself too, because like, okay, if you don't take a little bit of a break here, you're not going to be good at what you do or
Right.
for the people you're trying to serve or your family or your team.
Mhm.
So that's been something I remember thinking like, I never thought I'd have to deal with something like this.
Yeah.
I've learned a lot.
There were a couple questions that came in that I'd like to give to you guys. Carolyn was asking a question when Kristen was talking, and she was wondering that you had said you normally serve 68,000. How many are you serving during this time of COVID?
Sure. So we normally do about 68,000 meals a day, which is around 350,000 meals a week. At the peak week we've had recently is we've done over 500,000 meals in a week. On average, what we're hearing from our partners is about a 25% increase of the need. And I will say it's a pretty broad spectrum, though. We have some areas that really aren't seeing that much of a need to others that are seeing a more than doubling. So our partners are definitely experiencing kind of different impacts of this, but overall it's around 25%. But again, we think that the need is being muted, if you will, because of the policy changes of unemployment and SNAP expansion. And so if you see in weeks to come opportunities to speak out on extending those, please use your voice. Call our members of Congress. Extending those are going to be absolutely critical for keeping people from going hungry.
Definitely. Saren had a question about if you're an individual home gardener, because you had said that, fresh produce is something that you like to give out to people that are looking for help. Are individual home gardeners able to contribute any excess produce that they grow? And if so, how can they do that?
Absolutely. So what we usually suggest home gardeners to do is to reach out to their local food pantry. So on our website, when you go to our homepage, you have an option to click on our COVID response page. And from there, you can navigate to, we have an updated list of all of our partners' contact information and their current hours of operation during COVID. And so you can sort that by town. So you can go and look in your area and figure out which organizations are closest to you and give them a call and say, hey, I have produce, do you want it? I bet many of them will take it. We have some that are a little nervous handling donations, but most are. So again, we encourage you to reach out to your local partner. And that's whether you have produce or anything to offer. People always say, you know, should I donate to the food bank or to my local food pantry? And my answer is always both. But definitely call your local food pantry. I guarantee there's something, a way that you can help.
That's great. Joe has a question for both of you. How do your organizations manage the tremendous new need with the additional costs? So how do you know that the additional funds will be there when you're making your plans to change how you serve people?
Sorry.
Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think about what I think specifically about the COVID-19 fund and the funds that we've raised through that. We've been very intentional about making sure those funds are there and in hand when we make contributions to other organizations. And so when we think about planning ahead, our board has had some conversations about being very strategic about utilizing reserves to be able to say, okay, there will be some increased costs, even in the office around, you know, extra cleaning supplies, more cleaning, you know, things like that. And so if we're facing that, we know our partners who are doing direct service, who have a lot more people coming through the doors, are facing that. So how can we be most supportive of them? And so I think it's really, you know, just trying to be planful, but we always are facing a little bit of the unknown. And so I think we have that going for us because, you know, we do try to be thoughtful and strategic about those things.
Yeah, I think that is definitely the hardest thing we're facing right now. Our fiscal year runs July to June, so we're due to present a budget to our board in the next week, and trying to put together a budget based off of need, and also projecting supply of food. Right, our food donations are down considerably, so trying to figure out when do we think those food donations will come back? What's the need going to look like? And obviously, buying food is kind of the plug figure. You know, but buying food isn't what food banks do. Food banks, the whole model of food banking is to use the excess food that's in the supply chain, that's usually donated, and then distributing that to people in need. And so this is definitely a new area for us. But we have been fortunate to have received a lot of donations. And so we've been buying more food than we ever have before. What we're trying to figure out now is, not knowing how much the increase in donations is going to last for. Especially as the economic impact of this takes hold. Mainers are incredibly generous. And Shira, we had the same experience in a telethon we did of people calling in, giving us their stimulus checks, you know, saying, I don't need this as much as other people do. You know, but I don't know how generous people can continue to be as their own, you know, paychecks, you know, start to, if they don't come back soon. So what we're, I think, trying to do is, I always try to operate from a belief in the abundance of resources. So I don't want to sit here and not spend money waiting for a rainy day when if I look outside, it's pouring. So I think we are looking at spending down a lot of that and we'll continue to have kind of over the next 2 months, while not, you know, keeping, we do have a cash reserve policy. And kind of maybe coming up with an agreement with our board of if we really get into dire circumstances later in the year, do we have flexibility of maybe going into our cash reserve policy, going kind of to the the very lower end of those boundaries that normally we operate in to be able to respond. So I think we're going to be looking for flexibility from our board in terms of that financial oversight. And I always said I think I'd, again, we got to operate from an abundance of resources and faith that it will continue to come in, but, you know, be prudent at the same time, and finding that balance is what we're trying to figure out. It's not easy.
Sure, understandable. And I mean,
Oh,
go ahead, Shira.
I just wanted to like tap into that because I was thinking of that as you started to talk, because that over the last several years, we've really shifted to that away from a scarcity focus. And so while we are concerned and we don't know what the annual campaign will bring for next year, we have to think that it will be there and that it will come, and we will develop a contingency plan after our budget is approved, and thinking, you know, and keep a very close eye on things and adjust as needed. But if we are budgeting from a place of like, oh, campaign's going to go down by whatever the amount is, we're never going to go beyond that. So.
Sure. And, you know, I just feel like we learn new things about this virus and this pandemic like every day, right? It's hard to stay on top of the information coming in. Have you guys learned anything that you will use in planning for the second half of the year? You know, the scientists talk about there may be a resurgence in the fall that coalesces with the flu season. Are you making any plans now or thinking about it for the rest of the year?
Well, we are, because we do an annual budget that actually includes a couple years. So yeah, so we are looking at what the rest of the year will look like in terms of calendar year, but then also going into you know, our fiscal year will go into next June. So we are looking at that, as well as looking at, you know, we had set a few years, 2 or 3 years ago, we had set a bold goal that by 2025, all food insecure Mainers will have access to the healthy food they need to thrive. And at the time, that meant us going from about 25 million meals to around 33.5 million meals, and that was our goal. And we had, you know, projections every year. Well, now we're looking at that need could be, you know, potentially 70 million meals. So what does that do to our 5-year plan? And so, yeah, so we're definitely looking further down the road because we have to, because, you know, we have to make sure that we're able to continue to respond. But I definitely agree with Shira but we can't do that from a place of scarcity, because otherwise you would never get anything done. So we plan, we hope for the best, and then we charge ahead and make sure we have a couple plan B and plan C's in our back.
Plan B, plan D, plan E. You know, you guys have really had to change a lot about how your organizations work. I was wondering if you might be able to share some things that you're really proud of, or some things that were really surprising to you throughout the past few months.
There's a lot. I mean, I think for one is certainly the ability of our team, and I say that, I mean, staff and volunteer team, board of directors, to just really be nimble. And, you know, sometimes we act like we're this really big ship because we're a united way and we're part of this global network. And that's really changed over the last 5 to 10 years, because we have to be responsive, we have to know what's happening, and we have to be able to do the work. And so our ability to go remote, set up that fund, administer that telethon, continue to grant out funds on a bi-weekly basis and raise more funds, and still do the regular work. The tax prep still happened, you know, that's a testament to the team, and that has made me very proud. And in the midst of all that, being able to be forward thinking and think about, well, what's next? Okay, we can't necessarily go into the workplaces and do presentations like we've done forever. So now we're envisioning what a new virtual campaign might look like. And it's exciting to think about the fact that we've reached all these new donors through the COVID fund, who now have a connection to United Way and the programs that we're supporting through that fund. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, and that's been really energizing for me, despite the challenges of balancing home and family and working from my bedroom.
Yeah, I think a couple small things is I realized how much we really can do virtually. I realized how much time I used to spend driving across the state to go to 1-hour meetings.
Mhm.
Not doing that anymore. That's just silly. So we'll, there are times when you need to have that in person, but I think it's not as much as we think. This actually works pretty well. We've also been utilizing, this application. We've had now Zoom calls, town halls with our donors. We've had 2 of these with all of our partners. I don't know why we waited for a pandemic to do something like that. It was fabulous. And so I think we're definitely going to be continuing to use this platform to connect with people. So I'm excited that we've learned that skill. The other thing I'm really proud of is I'm really proud of our team's willingness to recognize when we need help that we can't do it ourselves. It happened with LL Bean. We did not even try to scramble and figure out how do we pack these boxes. Our team was really honest, saying, I don't think we can do it. And then we ended up having somebody from LL Bean reach out and say, how can we help? We said, can you guys pack boxes for us? And they're like, yeah, it's kind of what we do. And so it was great. Similarly, at one point, we've been buying all this shelf stable food. One of the biggest challenges is the supply chains are so jammed that a lot of the food we've been buying hasn't come in on time. And so we've had gaps. And I remember when we realized we were going to have a gap one week because a bunch of vendors had to cancel or push out deliveries. And we realized we were going to run out of food. And so rather than, kind of say, oh my goodness, what do we do? Someone's like, well, what about gift cards? And so we called up Hannaford. We said, we're like, how quickly can we get 50,000 gift cards? And they're like, 48 hours, done. And then we figure out if someone's going to drive them and pick them up and deliver them here. And it was just, so it was, but I think there were some people who, maybe were nervous saying we can't admit that we're out of food because we don't want to look like we can't do it. And luckily we weren't afraid to say to Hannaford, our #1 donor, we're out of food, which is kind of admitting failure here as a food bank to admit that. But no, we had to because we needed their help, and they were able to give us gift cards, and we were able to give out gift cards instead of food. So I think that's something that I'm hoping we can all learn from and keep telling our team members is it's not a sign of weakness to admit when you need help. And it certainly has brought in additional resources for us through this.
That's great, you guys. A question just came in from Sue. She is worried a bit about the summer meals for kids this year. I know a lot of schools, I live in Orono, so my school district was able to keep doing the school lunches for kids this year. And I know that that's something that you guys worry about every summer, really, food insecurity for kids. Is there anything that's being done differently this year? Or if people are concerned about it, what's the best way for them to help?
Yeah, so I'm looking down only because I just got an email and I want to make sure I use this, use the wording correctly. Yeah, so I think the school meals through the time when schools were shut down was definitely a highlight of our state at its best. The way the school districts were so quickly able to mobilize and still get those meals out to families, and how fast the DOE moved through all those waivers and all the flexibility that was being given. We just learned that area eligibility, meal pattern flexibility, on-site monitoring waivers, they've all been extended through August 31st. So this was a huge unknown that folks were waiting on. So all those waivers that allowed those schools to be flexible to meet the needs of their community are being extended all the way through the summer. So we're really hopeful this means that those school lunches will still be able to keep going out. But I would say, reach out to your school district to find out. I have seen every school district's doing it differently. It's like what Shira said. It's amazing how they're like, well, we figured out that so-and-so's got a car on Tuesday, so they could pick up this. Like that's how this is getting done. It's really amazing. And so definitely reach out to your school district, see if they may need drivers. They may need people, they may need to-go containers. But I'm sure there's definitely a a role to play for sure. But again, the schools and DOE have been amazing.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And I do see that some people are dropping some links in the chat. I am going to follow up with all of you with an email, and I will put those links for the Good Shepherd Food Bank, United Way of Eastern Maine, and the other things that are in here for you guys to see in an email, so you don't have to feel like you have to write things down or take notes. It's close to 6, so I just wanted to take a moment to thank all of you for coming. I really appreciate seeing your faces. I appreciate Shira and Kristen. They have obviously been super busy, and it seems like they have created some new partnerships. And if any of you were thinking about how you would like to help in your own communities, I will definitely put some links in the email for you guys to see. So again, thank you for coming, Shira and Kristen. You're doing amazing work. You're helping hundreds of thousands of people. And even though it's challenging, I know how much you and your organizations are appreciated. So thank you again for joining us.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everybody. See you soon.